September 29th, 1982. A suburb just outside Chicago. A 12-year-old girl named Mary Kellerman wakes up feeling sick. A cold. Nothing serious. Her parents give her a single capsule of extra-strength Tylenol. Within hours, Mary collapses on the bathroom floor. She is rushed to the hospital. She is pronounced dead before noon. The doctors are baffled. A healthy 12-year-old girl, dead in hours, from what appears to be a simple cold remedy. They run tests. They find nothing that makes sense. The cause of death is listed as unknown. But across the western suburbs of Chicago, the same thing is already happening to other people. In the same 24-hour window, 6 more people will take Tylenol, and 6 more people will die. No one has connected the deaths yet. No one knows that inside those red and white capsules, someone has placed one of the most lethal poisons on Earth. The killer is already out there, and the bottles are already on the shelves. Adam Janus was a 27-year-old postal worker who lived in Arlington Heights, Illinois. On September 29th, he bought a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol from a local grocery store. He had chest pains. He took 2 capsules. By noon, he collapsed on the kitchen floor. He was dead by 3 o'clock that afternoon. His family gathered at his home to mourn. His brother Stanley and Stanley's wife Teresa had headaches from the grief. They reached for the same bottle of Tylenol still sitting on Adam's counter. Stanley took several capsules. Teresa took 2. Within hours, Stanley collapsed. Then Teresa collapsed. Both were rushed to the hospital. Stanley was dead by that evening. Teresa died 2 days later. 3 members of the same family, from the same bottle. It was the Janus deaths that finally triggered the connection. An off-duty firefighter named Philip Capitelli heard about multiple sudden deaths in the area and called the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. He asked the question no one else had asked yet. Could these deaths be connected? The toxicology results came back fast. Every single victim had lethal levels of potassium cyanide in their system. Not traces, not contamination, massive doses, enough to kill within minutes. The cyanide had been packed directly into Tylenol capsules, replacing some or all of the acetaminophen inside. Whoever did this had purchased bottles of extra-strength Tylenol from stores across the Chicago area, taken them home, carefully opened the capsules, filled them with cyanide, resealed them, and returned the bottles to the store shelves. The tampering was invisible. The capsules looked normal. The seals were intact. There was nothing to warn anyone. When investigators checked the contaminated bottles, they found they came from different production lots, manufactured at different Johnson & Johnson plants, one in Pennsylvania, one in Texas. That eliminated the possibility of contamination at the factory. This was done on purpose. Someone had walked into stores, bought Tylenol, poisoned it, and put it back. The victims were random. There was no connection between any of them except geography. They all lived in the Chicago suburbs. They all took Tylenol. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Johnson & Johnson pulled every single bottle of Tylenol from every shelf in the United States. 31 million bottles, $100 million in product, gone overnight. Police and fire departments drove through neighborhoods with loudspeakers warning people to throw away their Tylenol. Hospitals set up cyanide testing stations. The FBI, the Illinois State Police, and local departments launched one of the largest investigations in American history. Over 100 federal agents were assigned to the case. They tested thousands of bottles recovered from stores across the Chicago area. They found 8 contaminated bottles in total, spread across 5 different stores. The geographic pattern was tight, all in a small cluster of suburbs on Chicago's northwest side. Arlington Heights, Elk Grove Village, Schaumburg, Winfield. Someone had driven from store to store planting poisoned bottles on the shelves. The contaminated bottles contained anywhere from 3 to 10,000 milligrams of potassium cyanide, enough to kill dozens of people per capsule. The 7 victims were Mary Kellerman, age 12, Adam Janus, age 27, Stanley Janus, age 25, Teresa Janus, age 19. Mary McFarland, age 31. Paula Prince, age 35. And Mary Reiner, age 27. Mary McFarland collapsed at work at an Illinois Bell phone center after taking Tylenol during her shift. Paula Prince was a United Airlines flight attendant who bought a contaminated bottle at a Walgreens store. She was found dead in her apartment. Mary Reiner had just given birth to her fourth child a week earlier. She took Tylenol for postpartum pain. She died in her home with her newborn baby in the next room. These people had nothing in common. They didn't know each other. They didn't shop at the same stores. They ranged from 12 to 35 years old. The only thing that connected them was that they reached for the most trusted over-the-counter pain reliever in America. That's what made this case so terrifying. The killer didn't choose victims. The victims chose themselves. Investigators focused on one primary suspect, James William Lewis. In October 1982, Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killings. He was tracked down in New York City and arrested. But the charge wasn't murder. It was extortion. Lewis claimed he sent the letter to frame his wife's former employer, not because he was the killer. He was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. He served 13. The FBI searched his home. They found no cyanide, no evidence directly linking him to the tampering. Lewis maintained his innocence on the murders for decades. He was described by investigators as manipulative, intelligent, and capable. He had a history of fraud and had been investigated for the murder of his wife's elderly neighbor in Kansas City. But without physical evidence, prosecutors could never charge him. The case file remained open. Other suspects were investigated over the years, including disgruntled employees and people with grudges against specific stores. None led anywhere. A second Tylenol poisoning scare hit in February 1986. A woman named Diane Ellsroth died in Yonkers, New York, after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. She was 23 years old. She had taken 2 capsules for a headache. Her boyfriend found her unconscious on the floor. She never regained consciousness. Johnson & Johnson immediately pulled all capsule products nationwide, permanently. They announced they would never sell over-the-counter medications in capsule form again. The FBI investigated the Ellsroth case as potentially connected to the 1982 murders, but no definitive link was established. The New York case was also never solved. Between the two incidents, there were hundreds of copycat poisoning cases and threats across the country. People contaminated products with everything from rat poison to hydrochloric acid. Eye drops were laced with bleach. Mouthwash was spiked with ammonia. The Tylenol case had created a blueprint for anonymous mass murder, one that terrified law enforcement. If someone could poison random products on store shelves and walk away, how could anyone ever be safe? How could any product ever be trusted again? The answer, authorities realized, was that the products themselves had to change. The era of trusting what was on the shelf was over. The Tylenol murders transformed consumer safety forever. In 1983, Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. Johnson & Johnson pioneered the triple-seal tamper-evident packaging that is now standard on every over-the-counter medication, food product, and beverage sold in America. The foil seal under the cap, the shrink wrap around the neck, the glued box flap. None of these existed before 1982. Every time you break a seal on a medicine bottle, you are interacting with the legacy of 7 people who died in Chicago. The pharmaceutical industry abandoned capsules, which could be pulled apart and refilled, in favor of solid caplets and gel tabs that cannot be opened without visible damage. These changes cost the industry billions of dollars. But they also set a new standard for corporate crisis management. Johnson & Johnson's decision to recall every bottle at massive cost, rather than downplay the danger, is still studied in business schools as the gold standard for crisis response. In 2009, the FBI conducted new searches of James Lewis's home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Agents spent 2 full days removing computers, documents, and personal items from his residence. They were reportedly using advanced forensic techniques not available in 1982, DNA analysis, digital forensics, chemical trace detection methods that didn't exist 4 decades earlier. In 2011, the Bureau requested DNA samples from Lewis and his wife. Lewis publicly cooperated and again denied involvement. He gave interviews. He wrote letters to newspapers. He maintained that he was an innocent man who had been unfairly targeted for 40 years. The investigation continued quietly. Other leads were pursued. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was briefly investigated as a possible suspect due to his Chicago connections and chemistry expertise, but was ultimately ruled out. Roger Arnold, a Chicago man who was wrongly suspected early in the case, was so tormented by public suspicion that he later shot and killed a man he believed had accused him. He served 15 years for that murder. The Tylenol case destroyed lives even beyond its 7 victims. James Lewis died in 2023 at age 76. He was never charged with the murders. The case remains officially open. No one has ever been prosecuted. The FBI has said they believe they know who did it but lack sufficient evidence for prosecution. The families of the 7 victims have waited over 40 years for answers that have never come. 7 people took a pill they trusted completely. They had headaches, they had colds, they had postpartum pain. They reached for a bottle that sat in every medicine cabinet in America. A bottle so trusted that people didn't even think about it. They unscrewed the cap. They shook out a capsule. They swallowed it with water. And within minutes, they were dying. The person who poisoned those capsules walked into ordinary stores, stood in ordinary aisles, picked bottles off the shelf, and brought them home. They pulled the capsules apart. They packed them with cyanide. They resealed them. They drove back to the stores and placed the bottles back exactly where they found them. Then they walked out. They drove home. They watched the news. They saw the panic spread. And they were never caught. The Tylenol murders proved something terrifying about modern life. That the systems we trust to keep us safe are built entirely on the assumption that no one would do something this evil. When someone did, the entire system had to change. The seals on your medicine bottles, the packaging on your food, the federal laws protecting consumer products. All of it exists because of 7 deaths in Chicago in the fall of 1982. And the person responsible has never been identified, never been arrested, never been punished. The case is still open, and the question remains, who poisoned the Tylenol?